Colossus is the most advanced lineup optimizer in daily fantasy sports. Lock and exclude players. Adjust player exposure to reduce risk of injury or poor performance. Customize individual projections or upload your own projections. Generate hundreds of optimal lineups in seconds. Name and save the best lineups. Create winning lineups for the top sites like DraftKings and FanDuel for free at dailyfantasycafe.com.
Hello and welcome once again to the Sunday Recap Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11, and that is the first time I actually got it right. The first time I always, it's people with different screen names. I gotta get used to them. I got a lot to remember, but either way, talking about Week 3, which was a fun week. Once again, we had multiple players with 3 touchdowns and guys exploding, and a lot of guys we expected, but also a lot of people who were under the radar or seemed like good plays, but turned into great plays. So we'll start off here with the Steelers and the Rams, and obviously injury concern here. Ben Roethlisberger went down. It looked to me like he was done, like the knee was shredded. I mean, he just fell, and you don't ever see that from Roethlisberger. I mean, he's been one of the tougher competitors in the NFL for years. So looks like they say 4 to 6 weeks. We'll see. But either way, for this one, Michael Vick came in. Not a whole lot happened after that, but not a whole lot happened before that anyway. Le'Veon Bell, definitely, he paid off. He ended up with 132 total yards, got a touchdown. Antonio Brown, an unspectacular 108 yards. If you can go 11 for 108 and be a disappointment to most DFS players, then your name must be Antonio Brown. But he was still fine, just not quite the upside we expected, but still the floor. I mean, the team scored 12 points. He didn't get a touchdown. He still had a pretty good performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because of the other wideouts around the league. They had monster weeks, so it makes 11 receptions and 108 yards pretty disappointing.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly in a debate between whether to go Julio Jones or Antonio Brown each week, but luckily Jones paid off this week. Last week, not so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's been a lot of people, their decision, and mine as well, most weeks. And unfortunately, I did go Antonio Brown this week, so if I guess I can be disappointed due to his salary, I wish I had been Jones. But I had Brown last week, so I mean, you can't hit them all. I mean, at least you got your nice high floor with either guy. And as far as the Rams go, gross. No thanks. They were terrible. And I mean, I was one of the people who had some shares of Nick Foles and Jared Cook, and I'm not proud of it, but it happened. And I mean, this game had the highest total of all the Sunday games at 48.5. Ended up 12-6. So obviously not the great game script that we expected. Next one, Falcons and the Cowboys, and we saw some explosions here. Both the running backs, Joseph Randle seemed like he had 3 touchdowns as soon as the game started. I mean, I know he had 2 in the first 6 or 7 minutes. Ended up with 3 there. Devontae Freeman had a huge workload, and you and I were talking about him before the show here, where he was the guy who, yes, he was a good value, but this is a guy who had chances to be the feature back last year and was a constant disappointment. So, I mean, he paid off huge for the people who had faith in him this week.
Yeah, I mean, we were both saying he carried the ball 30 times. That was highly unlikely. We did not see that coming.
Yeah.
I would have expected more looks in the passing game just because I expected the Falcons to throw the ball a ton, which they did. But overall, Julio Jones and Freeman were obviously the key options. And I think going forward, they're going to dominate red zone touches for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Lance Dunbar on the other side. Second time this year he had a big receiving game, 10 for exactly 100, so you liked it even more if you're on DraftKings for that bonus there. And Brandon Weeden wasn't terrible. I mean, he did throw 1 interception, but, I mean, he was fairly – I mean, they went the safe route with him. He didn't take a lot of chances down the field. But, I mean, he seemed like he was good enough that if Randall has success in the running game, that this could actually be a viable offense. But Brandon Weeden's still not a guy that I'll be playing even when he's cheap.
No. I mean – you figure a different matchup maybe. Like I said, next week he's playing the Saints secondary. They've been terrible. Cowboys could actually be a decent offense next week.
Yeah.
Fly under the radar.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you got a lot of explosive playmakers, especially out of the backfield. So,
yeah.
I mean, he doesn't have to do a whole lot throwing the ball about 15 feet and letting someone else do all the work for him and give him some stats. Next one, it was a tale of 2 halves with this one. Colts were getting pummeled early. Andrew Luck struggling again, turning the ball over a ton. Looked like this was another one of those situations where, we expected Andrew Luck to bounce back, and he struggled again. And all the tweets of everyone hating on him. And, he's 26 now, 27. Everyone's saying he's terrible and he's done. All this overreaction. And then Andrew Luck did what Andrew Luck does and came back from a huge deficit, dominated late in the game, and Mariota didn't have a bad game either on the other side. So two young quarterbacks ended up. This one ended up as a shootout, almost 70 points, and I definitely didn't see that coming either.
No, I think I saw a couple tweets calling Andrew Luck Matt Stafford Jr., which, come on, give me a break.
If only Matt Stafford were that lucky to be compared to Andrew Luck.
But, I mean, Colts, they didn't look great, though, in the first half. They really didn't. But, going forward, Frank Gore did give this team what they haven't had in a long time, and that was a run game. And you're really hoping to see it really balance out next week against the Jags. And Dante Moncrief, another touchdown, 3 in 3 games there. Definitely want a little more looks for him going forward, though, before really deploying him in lineups.
Yeah, he was the guy. I mean, he got that late touchdown, kind of bailed out some people that went on him. I had some shares, gladly not a whole lot. And, we saw Delaney Walker is a guy who we've seen put up some big-time games, with lesser quarterbacks than Mariota before. He had 10 targets in this one, 7 for 68. So he's a guy that you can definitely look at if you need like a filler at tight end moving forward here.
Yeah, he's a great cheap option.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Eagles and Jets here. This one, I mean, depending on who you were, you expected certain things. I expected a lot different than what we saw. The Jets defense looked great the first 2 weeks, granted, against lesser offenses. But the Eagles offense was the worst in all of football over the first 2 weeks as well. DeMarco Murray, late scratch. I mean, he wasn't 100% healthy anyway. So a lot of people went Ryan Matthews. A lot of people went Darren Sproles. If you went one of the two directions, you did well because Matthews had that big run. He ended up over 100 yards with a touchdown. Sproles returned a kick, and you mentioned even got a little goal line carry where he kind of snuck underneath somebody's legs. But I love Darren Sproles, and I was thrilled to see him get 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that happened in this game that before pregame that led to Sproles and Matthews and Murray and Powell and Ivory, all those guys. It was a mess, but if you came out with Sproles and Matthews, you ended up pretty good.
Yeah, and hopefully none of you ended up with Chris Ivory. I think he ended up still in one of my season-long leagues, which obviously isn't that important. But I wasn't taking the risk. Certainly didn't expect him to, not be on the field at all. But, I mean, I wasn't expecting big things. So moving forward, maybe we can get a guy, get him back going. But, I mean, it seems like he just wasn't 100%, and I don't know why he was even active if they weren't going to play him. But definitely be wary of that situation moving forward. And then Bengals and Ravens. I watched this entire game. I mean, I'm a Bengals fan, but it was, if you ask me, easily the most exciting game of the week. Especially the second half. It was Steve Smith versus A.J. Green. I mean, indirectly, of course, but both those guys exploded in the second half. Ravens couldn't stop Green, vice versa for Steve Smith and the Bengals. And, this was a game that was 14-0 at the half. Looked like it was going to be a blowout. Turned into a shootout. And, Andy Dalton started to look like playoff Dalton there for a couple minutes with a couple turnovers. And then, it just exploded. So this was a fun game that I didn't have as much exposure to as I wish I had, but definitely one that if you did at low ownership, you probably did really well.
Yeah, I didn't have really any shares. I actually had Tyler Eifert, who I don't even think had a look the entire game, so that was a bit disappointing. But then touching on the run game, neither from both sides, which I thought it was going to be kind of a ground and pound game.
Yeah.
Kind of low scoring, but it was completely the opposite.
Yeah, and Eifert, frustrating if you had him because he did have that touchdown that got called back. They said he didn't complete the catch. It was one of those gray area type of things too, where as a fan you are certain that it's a touchdown as a DFS player and all that, but if you actually look at the rules, it really wasn't.
Yeah.
Should have had it either way. Bucks and Texans. Hopefully, you didn't have very much of this game because it was ugly. I mean, we did see Mike Evans though, 17 targets. 7 for 101. Evans, we saw him explode in games last year. Certainly has monster upside, and he's fairly cheap compared to a lot of these elite options too. And Chris Polk was a guy that a lot of people went for because, quite simply, he's just a more talented runner than Alfred Blue. But the Texans stuck with Blue here, 31 carries and up with a $139. So he had himself a surprising, really nice game.
Yeah, he did. And I had Polk in early only contests, and I don't know what to tell you about that one. But looking at some other Texans, DeAndre Hopkins, another big line this week, kind of proven that he can do it with whoever's under center there. So pretty solid, 14 targets, 101 yards and a touchdown. And then I still think Cecil Short's great PPR guy.
Yeah, and Alfred Blue, to me, he's the Matt Asiata. He's the guy that's just not that good. He has those random big games. I don't have any more faith in him than I did before the week. Even if Aaron Foster sits out again, still not a situation I want any part of because it's just a bad situation right there. Chargers and Vikings. So the Vikings defense has looked bad. It's looked good. This week it looked great. And I mean, Phillip Rivers still had decent numbers, but I mean, it was the Keenan Allen show. And we thought with Ladarius Green out, there's some more looks for the other guys. Wasn't quite the case. It just seemed like Phillip Rivers really struggled instead. But big story of this one was Adrian Peterson. In case you didn't think that after last week he was back, he's definitely back now. I mean, he looked like the old Adrian Peterson, literally unstoppable. And this wasn't a great San Diego run defense to begin with, though.
No, I mean, Peterson, 126 yards, 2 scores. Probably where you're going to see him around, a lot this season.
Yeah.
And Danny Woodhead, nothing this week, actually, after a couple decent weeks here. And like you said, Keenan Allen, he's so inconsistent for me. It's either this or it's completely nothing. His floor is so low.
Yeah.
But
great GPP guy, though, with some upside. But
yeah,
he's a guy that I'm sure more people go back to in cash games next week. And you're more brave than I am if you're putting him in your cash games. But I don't blame you. The potential's there, but it's certainly risky. And, this one, and it looks like Adrian Peterson, I'm not sure exactly when he didn't play, but it was early in the fourth quarter they kind of pulled him. So it was a 24-point game, and rightfully so. I mean, no reason to risk that. But kind of sucked if you had him in your cash games. You're kind of hoping he'd break one more. But obviously they didn't need it. And then one who actually had decent amount of production here, Raiders and Browns. As you point out here, two of the worst teams over the last decade or longer. I mean, that's probably being generous. But Latavius Murray was a popular play, and rightfully so. He paid off. Amari Cooper, he was the impressive guy in this one, if you ask me. And you mentioned in your article here, too. I mean, Joe Hayden could not stop him. And Joe Hayden, as we know, one of the better corners in the league, or at least he was until Sunday afternoon. Yeah,
Cooper absolutely dominated, especially early in the game. And you figure if the Raiders kept this thing close, they would have kept going to Cooper, and he could have had potential for a really monster day. Next weekend, like I said, I've told you earlier, I'm looking at Cooper all the way against the Bears.
Yeah. Good luck with that one, Bears. This Carr and Cooper combo is looking really nice here, and like I said, Lab Murray's looking really good in the running game as well. So the Raiders, sneaky good offense, and it's weird to say offense and Raiders in the same sentence unless you're saying offensive, but they're definitely a team that's looking good. Some sneaky value there. Definitely not as sneaky as they would have been before this week, but certainly a team to look at. Saints and Panthers, this was one where Greg Olsen was a popular play, and if you had Greg Olsen, you obviously did really well. He was by far the top scoring tight end. It wasn't even close. A couple touchdowns. I think he had 134 yards. And, I mean, it's like you knew the ball was going to him in the red zone. Yep. This is a Panthers offense that doesn't see a lot of red zone, but at the same time, against this terrible Saints defense, saw a huge game from Cam Newton in this one. And I wish I could say I had a ton of shares. I didn't have nearly as much as I wished I had. I just, it's one of those upside games. He's got a good floor, but not always that huge upside. But, I mean, over 300 yards, multiple touchdowns. Cam Newton was the play of the week at quarterback.
Yeah, he definitely was. And this game really started out slow because I think, the Saints ran the ball a ton and kept Newton out the field. And I was a little bit worried, but he eventually paid off. And Tiggan Jr., not a bad week. 4 catches, 93 yards, going to be one of those home run guys who has some tournament upside going forward.
Yeah, and Mark Ingram was decent. He had 99 yards and a score, like you mentioned here. Really the only guy in that offense you feel even decent about, especially while Drew Brees is out. And Luke McCown, he was put in a position to not make mistakes, which is why he was so efficient. But this wasn't like a guy that was throwing the ball down the field with success. I mean, these were short passes, and he did his job. He did what he was supposed to do, kept him in the game. But once he had to make plays, he just couldn't make plays, and no surprise there. There's a reason why he hasn't started a game since 2007. Which it's good for him that he's been a backup in the NFL for that long. These guys got the best job in the world. But next one, speaking of best job in the world, being anyone who plays for the Cardinals is a nice job to have right here. Colin Kaepernick was just giving away touchdowns to the other team. 2 pick sixes in the first quarter, I think it was. I mean, he just looked horrible. They won the game by 40 points. We even saw Palmer and Fitzgerald hook up a couple more times as well. And, I mean, that offense and defense combo, the Cardinals look terrifying. I mean, if you ask me, it's them and the Packers as best teams in the NFC. And, I mean, it's hard to say it's not the Cardinals right now.
Yeah, I think especially because of the defensive side of the ball, they're just making plays and, they're running the score up. There's no taking the foot off the gas, and you got to like that about this Cardinals team. Yeah, because going down, Fitzgerald snagged his last touchdown within the last couple minutes of the game on a screen pass. So
when it was a
they're not gonna
33-point
let
game.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely like that. I mean, it seems like you said, they are matchup or blowout proof, and certainly don't expect them to win. I mean, even one more game by 40 points, but gotta like the fact that it's a run first or pass first and pass second offense. And even Chris Johnson had himself a throwback type of performance, which he was a guy I didn't have much faith in. I still really don't, but I mean, he looked good. I think this is just a product of the 49ers defense is just god awful. So, definitely a defense I'll be picking on as much as possible. Another blowout here in the late games. I mean, it seemed like they all were. Bills and Dolphins. Ty Goat, you say here as well. The guy has been incredible so far this year. Price finally starting to creep up, moving into next week. But, I mean, this guy's doing it all. And this was a Miami defense that was, big-time hype coming into the season as supposed to be one of the best units in football. And they got absolutely slaughtered in this one.
Yeah. I mean, looking around, kind of one of the things, Carlos Williams, big week at running back for the Bills there, and Charles Clay paid off on that revenge game narrative if you went that route. And then, Sammy Watkins left with the calf injury. Could get a bump next week, to surrounding guys like Percy Harvin. And I forgot the other name there for the Bills receivers. Not too many of them.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you got LaShawn McCoy came in, he got that early touchdown, and then he did a whole lot of nothing after that. And obviously they've got plenty of depth at most positions now, so it's partially an issue of him not producing, but it's also an issue of they just don't need him to do a lot. I mean, it's strange that a guy who used to be the focal point of an offense is such a role player now, but I haven't played him yet in DFS, and I don't see a scenario where I probably do anytime soon. So Bears and Seahawks, I wish we didn't have to talk about this one. We'll keep it short. Everyone knew Seahawks defense was in the best spot of the week, and it was, and I guess you can call it disappointing that they put up 18 FanDuel points and right around that on DraftKings as well, 17.9 or something like that. Bears didn't score; they didn't come close to scoring. I mean, it was a miracle they got first downs only because Matt Forte broke a couple tackles that they did. But I mean, outside of the kick return touchdown, the Seahawks defense was just good but not great. And I mean, they did what we knew they would do, is shut down the offense. They just didn't make quite as many plays as we were kind of hoping out of that defense and special teams.
Yeah, I think you got to look at the Seahawks as a whole. This was a pretty disappointing performance on both sides because you figure Bears defense is atrocious, so you figure they would have put up a lot more points, and they only scored one touchdown on offense, which was the Jimmy Graham touchdown. And I think going forward, 83 yards and the score for Graham pretty much his ceiling. So I'm not paying up for that.
No, not me either. And then the Marshawn Lynch situation, which I blame Pete Carroll for. I blame Pete Carroll for a lot of things. I just not a big Pete Carroll fan myself, but randomly Friday, not only does he say he's a game time call, but he says he got hurt in the Packers game, which was news to everyone, I think, including Marshawn Lynch. And so then he was a guy that I tried to get out of all my lineups. I think I ended up still with a couple shares, and he left the game with the injury. Surprised, not surprised, doesn't matter. I mean, he was a very risky play, but I mean, he didn't really produce while he was in there. But Thomas Rawls definitely paid off, over 100 yards there. So if Lynch sits, or if you're just looking for, another game where they favored by 16.5 points or something of that nature, maybe give a look to the backup here and see if he can't produce again.
Yeah.
Broncos and Lions, this one was fun for a little while. I don't know if you watched this game, but the weirdest officiating I've seen, and I'm not saying it was biased either way, but we saw some real weird calls. Like, I thought the Matt Stafford incompletion was textbook incompletion, hand coming forward, all these things. So game kind of changed a lot on that, but if you were someone who paid up for a lot of guys in this one, it wasn't great. I mean, Demaryius Thomas obviously had himself a big game. That was mostly because the Detroit corners just are incapable of playing the ball or playing, defense at all. But, I mean, Calvin Johnson was incredible. I mean, if you saw that catch that he took from Aqib Talib, that was one of the best catches I've seen in a long time. I mean, falling the opposite direction, just took it out of his hands. But he looked great, but if Matt Stafford can't get the ball out of his hand, get the ball to him without throwing interceptions, I mean, you can only do so much if the ball's not thrown anywhere near you. So Johnson's still that under-the-radar elite talent, but it's kind of hard to pay for him if Matt Stafford's going to keep playing like Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is the play calling's been bad for the Lions. I mean, they got tons of talent on that team with Golden Tate, Calvin Johnson, Abdullah there, but they don't get him the ball. I mean, outside of Calvin Johnson, I mean, still his targets aren't where he usually is. Yeah. It's disappointing. As for Denver, they did enough to win the game, but still weren't great. They didn't pay off their massive salaries like some of the other guys did, but they did look better.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly somewhat a product of that Denver pass defense, which is, I mean, easily top 5, if not the best in the league. But, I mean, at the same time, there's just so many bad decisions. I mean, Eric Ebron is a ridiculous talent, and, I mean, I think he saw, 4 or 5 targets in the entire game. I mean, you're not going to win games against a team like Denver with not getting your playmakers involved. So it's baffling to me. But, I mean, this is Jim Caldwell. I don't know if who else familiar with Jim Caldwell. I never thought the guy was a good head coach. But either way, I mean, he lost this week. I didn't win or lose a football game. I don't have a head coaching job, so he's got to know something that I don't, I guess. But either way, thanks for hanging out with us. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. We got lots of great content for the week upcoming and every other week in NFL as well to help you guys win at DFS. And we'll see you guys next time.